Traditional animal models often fail to reflect human biology. There are new tools called new approach methodologies. The challenge with them is there's no clear regulatory pathways. So I felt this was the right time to solve this big gap.
Drug development is at a breaking point. Billions of dollars, years of time, and ultimately patients' lives depend on getting this right. But right now, the industry is caught between innovation and regulation with no clear way forward. Today, I'm joined by Shashi Ramaiah, founder and CEO of Speccro, who spent his career inside big pharma and is now helping startup biotech companies navigate this exact problem, bridging cutting-edge science with real-world development. In this episode, we get into why most drug technologies never make it to patients and how startups are being forced to unlearn decades of industry thinking. All right, let's get started. Well, Shashi, thank you for joining me today for this episode. Looking forward to hearing more about you and about Speccro and what you're trying to do to help resolve some issues in your market. So why don't you sort of take this minute and introduce yourself and Speccro for me?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Heath, for the kind invitation. I should say this is my first podcast since I launched my company, Speccro.
Is that right? Well, I'm honored. Thank you.
It is. And obviously, I've heard a lot of great things about you, and I know we met each at the JP Morgan.
Yes, in
right?
San Francisco. Yes, at the
Yeah,
Golden
yeah,
Gate Yacht Club.
yeah.
Yes, we
Golden
did.
Yacht Club, and I'm appreciative of what you're doing, and thank you for this.
Oh,
But
thank you.
Shashi Ramaiah. I'm a founder and CEO of Speccro. This company I really started with the aspiration of leveraging all the experiences that I have gained over the years, a combination of what we do regularly for drug development, using all the tools and technologies, taking from early discovery to human and beyond. It's both an art and a science. So obviously, I learned quite a bit of science and art, and I also have, learned a lot of challenges: what works and what does not. Especially as you deploy these novel tools and technologies for drug development. I saw firsthand the advantages of these traditional models and emerging paradigms, and as well as the limitations of relying on either one or one alone or several. So that there was a clear scientific gap. Traditional animal models often fail to reflect human biology. There are these new tools called new approach methodologies. That includes in vitro models, AI/ML. The challenge with them is there's no clear regulatory pathways to those to implement. And there's a lot of energy right now with FDA and other regulatory agencies putting those guidances as to how we deploy. And this is really because of convergence of the technologies, the science, and the regulatory guidance. So I would say that bioconvergence is happening, which is why the excitement. So I felt this was the right time to solve this big gap in the industry, and which is why I launched this company.
Very interesting. And because you're talking about, a long-standing organizational structure in the healthcare, and now we've got technology coming out at us left, right, and center. It's like the Wild West of technology, and you've got overlying over top of it is this very structured regulatory process, and those two worlds are kind of colliding, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You said it right. It always happens, right? When you have all these technologies, we don't know the technical maturity of that because we don't know yet how to use them. And on top of that, we have used these traditional tools for many years, for many decades.
Right.
So it's always to find those examples to implement those. So that is what there's a real opportunity, but also there's a real challenge of what we've been doing throughout all these decades,
Right.
right? It is sometimes the inertia of changing things.
Right. For sure. Yeah. So what was the one thing that you saw that needed to be fixed? Like what was the one part that you decided I'm going to tackle this problem?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I would say, it's more about, I clearly saw a lot of tools and technologies, right? There's no dearth of tools and technologies. If you look at this field, when you say new approach methodologies, this could be anything
Yeah.
that can improve translation to human, right? This is not about, oh, we're going to replace animals. Yes, I think, it's for me, the way I look at it is it's about finding tools that are better, that better mimic human system.
Mhm.
That could be organoids, spheroids, it could be AI ML, it could be newer animal models as well, right? That we have not been using. So in a way, for me, there are so much of so many of these technologies, but you need a practical way to implement them, right? For that, you need this drug development experience and the experience being progressive and having these knowledge of tools and technologies. So that's where we Speccro come in, right?
Okay.
It's that how do we help companies being practical, pragmatic, as well as as well as think about these novel tools.
Okay. So how do you integrate Speccro then? How at what point do you actually step into the equation?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I always like to tell people that we come when the teams are companies. Companies could be startups, it could be biotechs, it could be even large pharma companies as well, right?
Right.
We are, we want to solve complex problems, right? Of course, we like, when you look at drug development these days, pretty much everything is complex.
Yeah.
You have new modalities like gene therapy, ADCs, biologics, different small molecules. So, and there's always this challenge to move quickly because patients are waiting. At the end of the
Right.
day, the goal for us is to move promising molecules to human, right? And so for us, it's about, can we find difficult questions where companies or startups are stuck with a challenge. They have some issues, they want to move faster. So we step in and use our large, experience in drug development, as well as understanding the tools and technologies available, which we call it NAMS. NAMS is a very regulatory term. I know audience would like to know what is NAMS, right?
Yeah.
NAMS
Yeah.
is
Go into that. What's
yeah,
NAMS?
NAMS is
Yeah.
basically a new approach methodologies.
Oh,
You know,
okay. It's
these
an
are
acronym. Another
exactly.
acronym.
It's an acronym that includes, any new tools, right? So that's where we come in. We come in where drug development companies, could be very early in their development or could be later on in drug development. I can give you an example where,
Yeah, that'd be
you know,
awesome.
right. One example could be a company comes in and asks us, "Hey, we have some safety issue to deal with, and can you explain the human relevance of that?" Right? And what we could do is leverage all these in vitro and computational tools to be able to help companies prioritize those molecules or help show that, hey, these findings is relevant, but you can monitor them using some biomarkers, or maybe it's not relevant to human, right? So that's one standard approach. And the second example could be where a mechanism that is already well established, and those mechanisms that the drugs are already in market, and you have a new best in class molecules coming behind, and we already have a lot of clinical experience. So in those cases, we don't need to be doing all these traditional animal studies. So in those cases, can you put together a package where you can minimize animals, we can do in vitro work, and you can leverage all these tools to help them advance their molecules.
And so, are you bringing a team of people to this problem solving process? Is that what you do?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good question. Right. I tell people where we stand now, we pretty much do everything except that we don't have labs,
Right.
right? And my team, I say team, but they're really my mentors, my peers, people who have worked in the industry, uh, huge amount of experience. So those are all my team members. They're all consultants, advisory members. These are all, some are full time. So I leverage collective experience to bring it to teams based on the questions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on top of that, adding the layer of technology and some digital and AI support, that also is part of your mechanism as well, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So the people element is one where there is advisory. I call it fractional drug
Yep.
developers and regulatory.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
depending on the needs, I bring them. As I know, I like to say some are, roll the sleeves and they have to get the work done. And
Yep.
some are very experienced that they are not, in situation of doing hands-on, but they come in when you have bigger problems. So
Right.
I bring those senior experts.
Right.
And the second thing, to your point, we have curated a variety of technologies, could be AI, ML, and organoids, spheroids, alternative in vivo models. And those have been, we've done a lot of diligence, we have curated them, and we continuously do that. And we have those resources in play. And so we bring those resources in terms of vendor selection, what questions they're asking, so that we can outsource to them and get the work done to tackle the questions.
And so then for your clients, bringing in this power force of people and technology, you're kind of streamlining a lot of the processes to get them to these milestones and places along their trajectory it faster, more efficiently. Is that the idea?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the goal. That's the goal. Especially these days when you have so many technologies available, and how do you maneuver
Right.
this plethora of many technologies available? It's not that complex technologies is always good, right? So that's where our team of people who are uh, practical drug developers come in also, right? Because
Right.
you want to have a mix of people who are open and progressive to unlearn what they have done and look at new things, but also at the same time, be practical that you can put together a package that are regulatory acceptable.
It's interesting you chose the word unlearn because what you're saying there is that people have learned to do things a certain way, and in order to move forward almost in today's environment, you have to unlearn and then relearn another approach, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. Personally, I can tell you about myself that I have been away from a big company for it's almost a year now, and I'm learning that small companies I work with, they are the way they look at questions is so different than how I learned drug
Yeah,
development.
right.
It's somewhat similar. The path is similar, but how do you get it done? How creatively you can get, because they have only so much resource. So for me, it's
Right.
about, listening to them, not just saying, this is what I have done.
That makes sense. Yeah. Because they're doing it, yeah, like you say, they have the same problems, but they have one more layer of complexity is that they don't have the resources. So they have to find their solutions in other ways.
Yep, absolutely.
Gotcha. So you came from was it a larger pharmaceutical company before?
Yes, yes, I
And
was in a company, Pfizer, you
oh,
may
okay.
know.
Yeah.
That's the one of the best thing that has happened to me because I love the work environment, the people, the science, uh, and relationships I had built, not only in the company I worked with, but also partnerships that I've established. So that enabled me to learn a lot. And
Yeah.
now in my new world, I'm seeing there are also different ways to get the work done.
It's a great lens to come to the table with, right? To because at some point, any one of these clients or companies that you're working with will make their way to that level at some point someday, potentially. Or that's
Yes.
their goal or vision anyways. So the fact that you have been in that place and now you're actually helping them work towards that, it would provide them with a lot of insight, I would imagine.
Yep. Lots of learning. Absolutely.
So how's been your role in that transition? So a year ago you were here at Pfizer, working and living in a large corporate drug world, and now you're at a small firm. You're the CEO. How has that transition been for you?
Wow. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I've not had time to reflect on that, but I'll tell you, uh, it is night and day. When I was in Pfizer, my badge is Pfizer,
Yeah,
for that matter, any big company.
yeah,
Now I come to this world, that is gone. And you start from scratch,
yeah,
literally. And and what for me is, understanding business development, understanding legal, understanding who are the stakeholders, startups, biotechs. It's been immense, those experiences. I tend to, obviously learn a lot. At the same time, I've already made many mistakes. I
that's the
I
only
wish,
way we learn.
right. I
Screw it
wish I
up,
yeah,
put it back together.
yeah, together. I wish I didn't do this. I wish I only asked someone else. Just because I'm a CEO, I just did it myself.
Yeah.
If I only had some patience to pick up the call and talk to someone, right? Um, but uh, but it's a huge change, and at the same time, there's so much network I had developed over the years. The people, they've been fantastic to help out.
Well, and it gives you, I mean, you're also a founder, so it gives you a relatable you're in a relatable place to the other startups that you're working with. And had you not experienced some of this, you know, founder pain, you may not be able to relate to what they're going through. So I think that the fact that you can bring that to the table when you're working with startups, you know where they're at. You understand their frustrations, their limitations, their fears, for that matter. So for you, helps you to be more relatable in that sense. And yet you still have this really large pharma background that you can also share with these startups. So interesting place to be at. And then, so how has it been for you with building your team? Because now you also had to build your team in order to launch Speccro. And how did you, what was that process like?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the way I want to answer that question is by way of reflection. I This has evolved quickly. What I was thinking to what I am. Initially, I was trying to raise some funds to build out this NAMS lab, you know. But then I realized, talking to people and investors, like where are your customers? Who are they? And then now I'm able to now think about developing those customers, finding out customers that I can help, and not start building out labs because there are a lot of labs already available.
Right.
And and so and so I was creative enough that I knew that I had good network. First, I wanted to have a team of people who are drug developers and also equally progressive thinkers. So I really handpicked close to 35 people who I worked with, veteran in the industry, experienced. And so that was a starting point. And and now, as I do this, of course, I had to create a lot of relationship with CROs, technology companies, AI ML companies to be
Right.
able to do the diligence and bring those resources as well. So lots of learning there in terms of legal, contracts, negotiations, um and right now where we are is now that the team is available is to basically look for right questions that we can help with the
Right.
challenging questions that I talked about, right? For that also remember I'm not anymore in a big company, I'm my own, so trying to have a credible story that we can help and we can create those examples.
Hmm.
That's where we are, and obviously the next step will be is to finding that niche resourcing capability that we can build our own now once we build this customer network.
And sometimes it's not an easy question to answer, like you said. Who are your clients, and who do you work with, and where do you find them? And sort of describing your ideal client is not always an easy. It's not always an easy thing to do. How do you look at that? How do you determine who your best client is going to
Mm,
be?
mm, mm. Yeah, look, I think, people always told me that when I was preparing the early slide decks or meeting material, hey, who are your customers, right? And I would say, hey, customers is everybody. They could be pharma, they could be biotechs. And I was like, okay. And then, over a period of months, I tried to figure out who gets excited with the story I tell people, right?
Hmm.
And I also noticed that some of these smaller companies, they tend to have the most need because they don't have all the resources.
Right.
Once they need a toxicologist. Other time they need an ADME or PKPD person. PKPD means pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics person.
Thank you.
Uh, and well, these are people who kind of help in early drug development, and then they don't have the resources to keep them full time, so they can get resources in and out based on their expertise. So I think I'm finding out that some of the startups and smaller biotechs are the sweet spot for us. Uh, I'm continuing to learn in that space. Of course, I strongly feel that even bigger companies, where these days, you got to go fast. You don't have all the resources to keep everything in house.
No.
I mean,
No, that's a big thing. Yeah.
yeah, science is so big that you cannot specialize in everything. So we are continuing to evolve in that space as to who our customers. But I think I get excited when I talk to some of these startups and biotechs.
Is there a component of what you do that is a is software or something that you have to actually integrate with some of these organizations?
Yeah, yeah. There are two things to your question. One is about, the computational component that is part of this new drug development tool. It's not new. Companies have always used these, but I didn't appreciate the uh, you know, level of outputs you can get from these computational tools for modeling, for predicting, for generating that weight of evidence, we call it, to show human relevance.
Hmm.
So that's been huge, and that's a bigger component of what we do, these modeling aspects. The second thing is about more of bringing all the data we gather. If you're working with a company, uh, how do we bring all the, maybe in vitro data, computational data, animal data? Can we bring all that and use our in-house computational tools to create some new insights?
Right.
That's something that we're trying to, build as well. But that's probably the next step for us.
Because the world is a we have an abundance of data right now, and there is it's a great point to talk about. We have a lot of data, and I don't think everybody knows exactly what to do with it. We've been collecting data now, and there's not always an easy solution or an obvious solution as to what to do with the data. And maybe is the data sitting there waiting for somebody to come along and do something with it?
Yeah, you're right. There is clearly no doubt there's a lot of data. But as you know, data is everywhere, and it's all labeled differently, right? Different systems. The company, in my previous experience, as well as I, in the last 1 year, talking to many companies, same story, right? What kind of data? There's so much data, but obviously we're looking for high quality data. My computational experts will
Right.
tell me garbage in, garbage out, right? They're right. Uh, and companies are realizing it. Clearly, there are some good data out there. How can we use that? How can we prospectively generate internal data? That's another thing we help out. For example, some of these AI ML companies want to leverage the existing public domain data as well as prospectively generate in vitro data. That's where we come and help those companies help generate those right sorts of in vitro data so that
Right.
they can leverage all this high quality and at the end of the day generate these new insights into
Oh,
drug.
very interesting. Right. So that's very interesting. And so how can do you actually integrate in with their systems as well? So you kind of you have a preparatory intellectual property, or you've got proprietary software that you actually use and implement with their organization.
Yeah, we right now we don't have our own product, but
Oh, okay.
we would like to. Initially, we went quickly to to develop these and realize that it's a lot of resource
Yeah, yeah. And
and
is there
now
enough out there that you can leverage for
you
that?
could we
Oh, I
could
see. Okay.
absolutely. There
Yeah.
are so many. It depends on the kind of tools we want in the ADME PK space, in the predictivity toxicology space. Some have been there for many years. It's pretty standard for ADME PK that people use. So we leverage them. We leverage companies that have those softwares already available for some of the toxicology similar things. We've been able to leverage so far.
But you have the experts that can understand it, and once you kind of are able to sort of determine which of those programs are relevant and do the best work, you've got the people who actually know how to run those programs. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds. You got someone else who's developed them, but you got the experts that actually know how to use them and which ones work the best.
Yeah,
So that's kind of, they're able to take advantage of that as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So how does the process start? So you identify a client that you're going to onboard. How do you onboard them, and what does that look like for a new client?
Yeah, yeah. I've learned quite a bit. In my days, I was one of those scientists who did only science, and now, I'm able to do all that. Yes, it's a pretty standard, I would say. Uh, Companies come to us, with typical negotiation, the CDAs, confidential agreements. Uh, and sometimes it also depends. We create also the master agreements if we think it's a large set of work and it's for long term. And then I think I've always liked exactly defining the kind of work, like the work orders, right? Where you start small, what the exact deliverable is, and then once you finish that, phase one, phase two, phase three sort of situation. That has worked well. That way, we know exactly what are the type of resource they need, what work need to be done, and if we achieve that, we're going to go to the next milestone. So far, it's been those milestone-based work we've been doing. We've also had conversations around milestones as well. Maybe some companies say, "Hey, we have this molecule. We want your help to move it to maybe a compound development stage." That's the milestone in drug development.
Right, right.
Some companies call it compound selection. Some companies call it development compound
Right.
stage uh,
Okay.
before they go to human. So we've been in conversations with companies work on milestone based as well. But at the end of the day, at least personally, I'm big into problem solving. I don't get caught up in what is the work order, etc. I leave it to someone else. But for me, it's, hey, what's your problem? How can we solve? We are desperate to solve problems.
So that's where you like to put your energy.
I like to put my energy into looking at what challenges companies are facing. Uh, how can we accelerate those milestones for them? I have to tell you, these biotech companies, they have limited resource, especially this day and age.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Every experiment they do, we've been helping with one company because you can't mess up these experiments. Even if you mess up, you better think about this carefully. Of course, not to say that companies don't think seriously, they do,
Yeah.
but this is an extra layer of limited resource. So you have to be careful about how much do you spend, what are the key questions, what are the go, no go sort of decisions.
So at this age of your company, it still allows you to be the CEO, the founder, and also be able to work with clients. Because it sounds like that's really important to you. You sound very passionate about that component.
Yeah, absolutely.
At some point, do you see in the future where you might have to make that decision? Do I stay CEO and just keep running the company? Or do I move over, let someone else CEO, and I'm going to continue working with clients?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm in a much different part of my career than some, people who think differently. So I've always been, especially in a previous roles, right? There's always this, companies used to call, learning from other people, right? Succession and all that. So
Sure.
for me, look, I am at the end of the day a scientist who have learned business over my duration.
Right.
Absolutely. My goal is really, build this ecosystem. I like to call this, I have always been a ecosystem builder, whether it's building
Mm-hmm.
own labs or building organizations starting from scratch. So if I can get this to a place where, any questions related to these newer drug development tools, companies and in Speccro, we want to be that company
Yeah.
where people credibly recognize this company, where we help meaningfully bring these tools for drug development. So, if I, uh, as we get that, I would love to, obviously, have people who can move on and do other things.
As a startup yourself, you've also gone down the investment track or investors track where you're looking for doing fundraising yourself. So that's another area that you can relate to when it comes to talking with drug development companies, particularly startups, because that's usually a big holding pattern for them is finding the right investor, getting the money for some of the programming that they need to do. So, how for you in this in this new experience of yours has the funding and fundraising component been for you?
Yeah, I when I came to this, I was very passionate about fundraising to build out the labs, uh,
Right.
which uh, which I had to pivot a little bit and focus on building a customer base first, without building out labs and leveraging what's available in the marketplace.
Right.
Uh, and
Is that originally what you thought you wanted? Is that you were going to build out labs? That was the
Yeah,
original concept.
correct. Because the reason is I've always done that. It was natural for me
Right.
to think that way, but I
And
had
you had
to
to unlearn that.
unlearn that, and I had to think. Look, I'm also a drug developer, and I have a network of people, and I also know where the work can be done because that's
Yeah.
so equally important. Because it's also a maze out there as to,
Yeah.
you know where the expertise lies, where are the good labs. Unfortunately, in this industry, uh, there are places just like anywhere, they know more than companies. They know people who work in those companies, and if they believe that, in some specialty areas, as long as those people are there, they go to those companies,
Yeah.
right? So for as long as we had the companies that we know who we work with, uh, which is why, to your question, I sort of change the direction of focusing on the customers first. And then meanwhile, it'll give us an opportunity to see what is the gap in terms of labs,
Right.
you know? So that's the step.
Sure, that could be a future problem to
Future.
solve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're already thinking about it because once we have a good lineup of customers, it gives us more credibility, and we also will have more experience as well.
Yeah, you'll be able to determine, okay, we know where to take the lab now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Interesting. What as the growth process has happened for you, what are you finding right now is your biggest obstacle in growing the business at this stage?
Yeah, in terms of growing business, I think for us it's more visibility to the
Mm,
company because, like I said, this is, this is a really early startup, and this is also a space where it's not like a traditional CRO. No, it's not like a in vivo lab or a technology company that we're building, right?
right.
So this is a unique place where uh, we are trying to enable drug development using these what has worked in the past and combining that with some newer tools, tackling some challenging questions. So for me, it's to scale this customer experiences first, right? And to do that, that's always a challenge in this day and age because, as you know, the right now the industry is pretty tough
Yeah.
with post COVID, and if I live in Boston and I'm very close to all the buildings out here, and there's still a lot of empty buildings out there. Although I see, last night I was driving, I see some movement, so people have now are focusing so much on their pipeline and less of early research. So that is creating some challenges. But for me, for us, it's as a company, it's more about focusing on how can we identify companies and how can we be visible, how can we generate some good examples. That's the biggest piece. That's one, I would say.
Hmm.
Two is whole lot of technologies are available in the background. Technologies that are, you know, organoids, spheroids, many CROs that I'm excited I'm talking to. It's about, we know who are good, but also equally we want also companies that are more efficient, that are faster. That's always a big challenge. So I think a couple of those things, uh, the customer level as well as our partnership level, those are the two areas that I continue to think about.
Very good. And we've said this a few times. Economically, things are difficult right now in this sector. Um, do you feel? I mean, it's always a hardship when you can't find the resources financially to do what you want to do, grow your company. However, do you find that having these experiences for founders and startups in life sciences or healthcare or drug development, do you find that it creates more resilience or gives them a new opportunity to look at their what they're doing from a different perspective, not having a constant income of funding going on? Like, do you find it gives people an opportunity to maybe unlearn some things and be more resilient and be more of a solution finder? Do you agree with that, or do you think it's just a struggle no matter what? If you don't have the money, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, my experience of 1 year has taught me a lot of things because runway is important, right? Because it's always this. I was listening to a podcast recently, a very successful biotech company, which is they are expecting it to, in a short time frame, going to be a billion-dollar company. I was listening to a podcast and he was telling me when he started this company, he had two options. One is spend all the money quickly and generate the best experiment, best data sets to excite people. The other option was take that for 2 years, 3 years. And he chose the former.
Hmm.
And, there is
Go big or go home.
go big or go home. Absolutely. And in fact, he had from his own money.
Is that right?
Right. And it is fascinating to hear the story of this company. So, uh, and also my perspective is there is always going to be dearth of money, no matter what.
Yeah.
And my experience is that you've got to be cost efficient. You've got to deploy the capital the right way, whether it's small or big, right? So I think, of course, on top of that, you need to have some luck. Luck doesn't come for everybody, right? You got to circulate, you got to talk to people, you got to, people like yourself, right? What
You
you're
got to
doing.
talk. You got to meet people. You got to
Yeah,
network.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Build your circle of influence for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, any advice you would give to startup drug companies out there, at, whatever stage they're at? What's some really good advice that you would offer them?
Yeah, you know, someone told me recently, which I kind of hit on me, is uh, business uh, takes some time to be out there to be successful, right? There are a lot of days where you feel like things are not working, and there's one day that feels like wow, right? So relish those things to me, because the day that feels good, the day you got business, the day you got some exciting data, those days mean a lot because that's drug development, really. A lot of bad days, which means three steps forward, one step backward, right?
Right.
And you look back a few years from now and you say, wow, how much have I learned? Whether it's people relationships, whether it's drug development, whether it's solving problems, you are accumulating the experiences. So to me, I say hang tight for people.
It's great advice, Shashi. Yeah. Hang in there and focus on what's gone right rather than what's gone wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was
Good advice.
fortunate to recently uh, move to a place where in Boston area to a Cambridge Innovation Center where I get to meet a lot of incubator and a lot of CEOs, international community. It's amazing how much sometimes you the change you make. You can interact with different people. All it takes is a couple of ideas, couple of relationships that can change.
So what's next for Speccro?
Yeah, for us, I think I wouldn't use the term scaling for now, but for us, it's more about expanding the customer relationships, expanding our network, and expanding the examples we can solve. Uh, Whether it's solving problems, whether it's advancing assets to the next milestone. Uh, really, I think what I would say is if people are watching your podcast, who can be a startup or who just have a one asset, or they have an established team with multiple assets and they want to be creative and they want to be time efficient and leverage these newer tools, uh, reach out to Speccro. We are there to solve real problems, advance promising programs, and at the end of the day, Heath, what we're all trying to do is the same thing. is moving drugs towards patients who urgently need them. Every decision we make, I was taught, previously in what I did, it was always about patient impact, and I tend to keep that in mind, and our goal is to do that by, relevance, rigor, and real world benefit.
Wow, what a great statement, Shashi, to end with. Wonderful. I've really enjoyed learning about you and about Speccro and the impact you're making in helping companies in drug development and startups to live their vision and see their dreams come true. So yeah, it's an amazing place for you to be. So thank you for taking this time today and sharing your story with our listeners. And I hope we do this again, and we'll have a different story next time.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Heath, for taking your time and helping talk about Speccro as well as the larger drug development problems. So look forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in another episode.